Hi everyone, this is Nick Pollock here from Roar Lions Roar. While you're here, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that alert bell so you never miss any of our new content. And if you prefer to listen instead of watch, make sure you check us out on your podcast platform of choice where you can subscribe and download each new episode. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Go State!
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host, Bill DeFilippo, joined tonight by my co-host, Craig Fritz. Craig, what's going on?
How's it going, Bill? Just adjusting to the time change here in Maryland. It's hit us pretty hard in the Fritz household, so we're just trying to get through that the difficult times that folks are having out there with the early darkness.
Yeah, I did the thing today where I woke up. I shouldn't tell the story to a dad because he'll get mad at me. But I woke up and I rolled over and I looked at my phone and I saw 7:45 and I was like, damn, I wanted to sleep in a little bit more. And then it dawned on me, wait, no, I did sleep in about as much as I normally do. So that was nice. And I know you probably want to kill me now. So let's talk about something. What was that?
I was just gonna say your 7:45 was my 5:45 with my old saying. But for him, it felt like 6:45. So, I can't really blame him. He's only 18 months old.
Yeah, I guess. But let's talk about let's talk about something that isn't the time change, and that is Penn State's drubbing, walloping, beatdown, whatever you want to call it, of the Indiana Hoosiers in Bloomington on Saturday afternoon. The Nittany Lions went into a place that has been a bit of a little shop of horrors for them over the years, and picked up a very, very convincing 45-14 win, outgained the Hoosiers 483 to 196, 27 first downs to their 11, 304 passing yards, 179 rushing yards, won the turnover battle, won the time of possession battle. Craig, this was just about the perfect, little things we can quibble with here and there, but this was just about a perfect performance out of Penn State on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you consider the injuries on the offensive line that no one really saw coming. They mauled Indiana.
Yeah.
And I think this is probably Tom Allen's worst team in the last handful, and they have no consistent quarterback play to speak of. But the way that the offensive line got a push, the way that the defensive line was living in the Hoosier backfield, it was almost shocking at some points to see how violent guys were getting to Tuttle and the other quarterbacks at IU and disrupting plays.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the offensive line, certainly. I mean, that was, to me, I think a lot of people are going to say the big story of the game was Drew Aller getting a ton of run, or Katron Allen's performance. Katron Allen very well might end up being the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week for his performance this week. But before we get into any of that stuff, Craig, I want to start by asking, was this what you expected out of Penn State in this game? What I ask by that is like, not was this what you expected at the very best end, the top 10 percentile performance that we'd get out of Penn State, not what you would think of the best case scenario if everything went right, blah, 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 blah. Was this what you were expecting Penn State to be able to come out and do against Indiana? Because I would argue it was that old issue of coming off of a loss. It was coming off of a very emotional game against Ohio State. We saw Ohio State earlier in the day look like they were look like they had a hangover in their game against Northwestern. So maybe some fears of that with the offensive line issues, with kind of the looming questions about the quarterback. Did you think this was something that Penn State was going to come out and do, or did you think this was going to end up being a lot more difficult than it ended up being?
Well, I picked Penn State against the spread, and it was 13.5 at least that I got, and so I expected this to not necessarily be a close game. I think the way that it ended up playing out was not how I would have foreseen it going at all. Even though knowing that we've had tight, weird games in Indiana in Bloomington, I would say weird is a good description. Maybe games that the score ended up being larger margin than what it was when we had a defensive touchdown in the last 90 seconds that turned a close game into what appeared to be a blowout. But I did not expect the dominance that we saw basically once Penn State got into the rhythm of the game after the first few series. It was like they were decisive, knew what they wanted to do generally, and I was impressed, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean the thing I went on to the Hardcore Penn State Football podcast this week, and I basically said my thing with this game is that it's just always a weird game against Indiana. And that was why I picked something like Penn State to 28-14. Indiana gets up for this game. Penn State, sometimes ends up reeling, find itself reeling heading into this game. There was that really great quote from Bryce Effner, I believe, where he basically said, Penn State did not have music in practice this week because James Franklin wanted the players to have to bring their own energy, to have to come out with the fire lit under their asses because, we'll be candid. We knew what the situation was going to be in Bloomington. That was going to be a dead crowd. It was going to be a dead game against an opponent that's not particularly good. And Penn State was going to have to find that extra gear again, referencing the Ohio State Northwestern game, will so often be hard for teams to find after emotional games, particularly after emotional losses, and has been a bit of a problem for Penn State over the years coming off of losses. So I did not expect this. I truly think this is, on both sides of the football, one of the best overall performances we've seen out of the James Franklin era in Happy Valley. And, there was really that one moment in the first half. Yeah, in the first half where Penn State scores a touchdown. Indiana comes right back out, goes ultra high tempo, has them on their heels a little bit. It looked like they were just really struggling with the speed that Indiana wanted to play at. Very next play, Sean Clifford makes a poor read, throws an interception. Brenton Strange's arm hits it, pops it up in the air right into the arms of Taiwan Wall, whatever. Indiana has the ball, Craig. 1st and 10 from the Penn State 31. And here's what happened after that. 3 plays, first down to get down to the Penn State 19. 1st and 10 from the 19, loss of 4 yards. 2nd and 14 from the 32, or 2nd and 14 from the 23, loss of 9 yards. Then a false start. 3rd and 28, a sack of 7 yards. Indiana has to punt. And for me, that was the moment in this game where I went, okay, anything that happens now, Penn State's in total control. Because once that happened, I'm interested in your thoughts here. Once that happened, I thought Indiana was dead to rights.
Yeah, I'd agree. It was so impressive to see the defense just completely negate the turnover. And if you remember, they sort of did that against Ohio State last week when you had this freak ball pops into the air, gets picked. The defense also came out and negated Ohio State, kind of made sure that turnover didn't matter, really picked up their offense and got the ball back. It was just remarkable to see. I mean, I think the total was something like 16 tackles for loss by the defense, which is an absurd number.
Yes.
I don't have it in front of me how many plays Indiana ran. But 16 tackles for loss is like a quarter of the plays in the game. It's just ridiculous. And so to see them not wilt in it was a mausoleum in Bloomington. And that's no disrespect to the fans there. There's not a whole lot to cheer about with this particular Hoosier unit, but they really, they, as you said, brought the energy the entire game. The defense was flying around, pumping each other up, big play after big play. And I agree, that was a huge turning point in the game. And I mean, you never want to see a guy injured, but once they knocked Tuttle out of the game, it was basically it was academic at that point. There was no way Penn State was going to do anything other than win the game.
Do you think the true freshman Brendan Sorsby that they put in after Tuttle, like that was punishment for missing a class or something? Because I cannot imagine why on earth they, especially because then after they put him in for a few plays and that obviously did not work, they then went to the guy who can move and like he didn't do anything, but he still had a little bit of juice about him. It was ridiculous. But like you mentioned, 16 tackles for loss. For Penn State's defense, Kobe King led the way with 2.5. Nick Tarburton had 2. Adisa Isaac had 2. Chop Robinson had 2. And a whole lot of guys had either 1 or half of 1. And then sacks, Nick Tarburton, Jair Brown, Adisa Isaac, Chop Robinson, Devon Elliott, and Keziah Izzard all registered 1.
And can we talk about real quick just how violent these tackles for loss were? Like,
yeah,
Nick Tarburton's sack was like bone rattling. Jair Brown's sack would have destroyed anyone not in pads. I mean, they were through the line so fast that I literally did the yelps and the yips watching the game. Like, you know, it was just ridiculous. And I keep saying that, but it really was.
The Jair Brown one where 3rd and a mile, he's up against an offensive lineman. He gets around him. The running back comes up to block him, and he just like one Euro step and like, oh my God, it was so good. So let's get into talking about this game a little bit. We will talk about Penn State's quarterback situation in a second. I know everyone wants to hear about that. We will get to that in a bit. But before we do that, I want to start by just looking, Craig, at both sides of the football and what went right for Penn State in those two facets of the game. And I want to start with Penn State's offense. Like we said, 483 total yards, 304 yards passing, 179 yards rushing, only that 1 turnover, 7 for 16 on 3rd downs, 2 for 2 on 4th downs. And I say all of that, Craig, and the thing that makes it so wild is that, you know, depending on how you want to define Bryce Effner's role, Penn State had 2 starting offensive linemen. Again, 2.5 if you want to count whatever role Effner has. So when you look at this offensive performance for Penn State, what was it that went right and made it so the Nittany Lions were able to put up 45 points and nearly 500 total yards?
I mean, 1 sack allowed and only 3 tackles for loss in the entire day. And I don't know, you know, Indiana's defensive line pedigree, or it just seemed like JB Shelton is a true freshman starting. I messed up his name.
Drew Shelton and then JB Nelson. I never realized Shelton and Nelson can be. You are like, I'm not making fun of you. Legitimately, I can see how you would mix those up. Yes,
I'm also old, and anyway, we have a true freshman left tackle, and the kid got beat a couple times, but you know, Clifford only got sacked once in the first series, and they were opening running lanes for these running backs the entire game. It seemed like every time Penn State needed a couple yards, they were able to get it. Every time Penn State was on the goal line and Katron Allen got the ball, you felt like he was going to score, whether through a ridiculous individual effort, breaking 3 tackles, bowling over a guy at the goal line, or having this like chasm open in a cutback by the offensive line where they just completely washed the IUD line down. That was to me the most impressive. Sean Clifford and Drew Aller generally clean jerseys the entire day. And the running backs were just able to be beasts in the red zone, which has been a struggle for Penn State on the road. Anyway, you know, especially during the COVID year, holy cow. But that to me was to have all those guys out. You're down Wallace, you're down Fashanu, you're down Tangwall, Hunter Norzad gets hurt. It was just Sal Wormley was out was nicked towards the end of the game. And for them to just continue to maul this Indiana defensive front was impressive.
Yeah, you mentioned the 1 sack that a Penn State quarterback took. That was Sean Clifford, and there were some moments where Clifford had to run around to evade sacks later in the game, but that one sack came after Norzad gets hurt on the very first play of the game, and they have to put in JB Shelton in the offensive line on the left side, protecting the quarterback's blind side. Were a true freshman and a junior college transfer. So I think I think it was important to mention that, because that's what I was going to point to as well, Craig. Like, this is one of those games that it is a testament to what James Franklin, I think, saw in Phil Troutwine when he decided he was going to make him Penn State's offensive line coach, as a guy who could develop offensive linemen, as a guy who can scout and identify offensive linemen, and as a guy who can have a 5-man offensive line unit where there isn't an obvious weak point that an opposing team could just hammer and hammer and hammer and hammer. Like we mentioned, true freshman in Drew Shelton, junior college transfer. Juice Scruggs been a solid guy. So we Morley has been a little up and down. Bryce Effner, a bit of a weird role in this team. Think about every Penn State offense that we have seen under James Franklin. And if at any point they had to go down even one starting offensive lineman, that has been something that snowballs for this team, or is liable to snowballing for this team. That front last year against Villanova got pushed around. And this, like you and I have mentioned a few times in this pod, and I'm sure we will mention a million other times, this is not a particularly good Indiana team. By the second half, they just looked like they didn't want to be there anymore.
Yeah.
Like that mixed with the fact that, we'll look at their drive chart. They had that 8-play touchdown drive, then that 6-play drive that ended with the 4th and a mile and a punt, and then 3 plays, 2 plays to kneel it out. Second half, 3 plays, 2 plays, 3 plays, 7 plays, 1 play, and then it's 45-7 by that point. That defense was exhausted, and obviously that plays a big role in it. But at the same time, Penn State's offensive line was able to do more than what it needed to do. It's at the point where I'm a little bit upset that we didn't get to see the ones, because I think Olu Fashanu would have just driven someone through the earth's core.
Yeah, for sure.
With this performance. So I think this, I was just going to say, I think this is one of those performances by the offensive line that the fact that they have, 8, 9 guys they trust to one extent or another is something huge. It's invaluable. And we saw them get a couple of guys experience and run who, if Fashanu goes to the NFL, if Scruggs is done, I believe Scruggs is done after this year. Scruggs is done after this year. They have guys they could put in there that they could trust. And the other thing you mentioned, Craig, and I'd love for you to kind of, no pun intended, take the ball and run with it, is the performance of Penn State's running backs. Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, the two of them combined 34 carries, 159 yards, 4.68 yards per carry, and 4 touchdowns. Neither of them, the longest run that Singleton had was 15 yards. The longest run that Allen had was 12 yards. They lacked those big plays, but what they lacked in big plays, they made up for in just consistency and reliability.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, I almost felt like Nick didn't have 16 carries, just feeling like the game flow. It felt like every big run was coming from Fat Man, but, just the way that let's go to the first touchdown where Singleton runs into this freeway, open freeway to the left. And I don't know if everybody picked up on it, but they flipped Effner over to the left side and went jumbo on that side with an extra offensive lineman. And Indiana just had no answer for it. They were just completely paved out of the way. And with Singleton's speed, there was never a doubt that he was going to get to the corner. And he didn't even have to turn on the jets to get there. And then, I'm just so impressed with the way that Allen is patient, but hits the hole hard when he sees it, and is turns these 2-3 yard gains into, holy cow, he popped that for 9. Oh, he popped that for 7. And then I think it was his third touchdown where he looked dead to rights in the backfield, and he jukes a guy, shrugs off a tackle, and then just blasts his way into the end zone. And I'm just sitting there going this is a true freshman.
Yep.
Who now this is Penn State's 9th game of the year, so he's had some seasoning and has a bunch of carries. But holy cow, just the natural. It's such a refreshing change. We were robbed an extra year of Journey Brown with COVID and his heart issue, and I'm glad that was discovered. Player safety, but since 2019, it's been a slog for backs at Penn State, and this is like a revelation. It's so cool to see.
Yeah, and you mentioned Allen shrugging off guys. That does not even include his 2 catches for 72 yards, the second of which went for 45 yards, where he catches a ball a yard behind the line of scrimmage. Someone on Indiana literally has him dead to rights in the backfield. And he just kind of, big brothers him. The guy gets off him, and he has that big run up the sideline, slaloms across the middle of the field, and gets up the sideline a little more. And just like to really drive home how tough of a dude he is. Someone on Indiana came up to him to tackle him. He just lowered his shoulder and just like popped right into the dude. So yeah, I'm actually glad that you mentioned Singleton's touchdown, because I think Allen's touchdowns, obviously they deserve a lot of mention and a lot of credit. I think what he does, like you mentioned, his ability to see a hole, foot in the dirt, attack it, pick up 6 or 7 yards, that's the stuff that is, it's why I think he is Penn State's best running back right now, for how talented I think Nick Singleton is. Singleton, he looks like a running back who comes from an optional offense in high school. Allen looks like a kid who comes from IMG Academy and has been running college and NFL stuff from the time he was, from the second he stepped on campus. So like, I think that'll come with Singleton, but I'm really glad you mentioned Singleton's long touchdown run, because you mentioned Effner going over to the left. How many times over the years, and this goes to the offensive line, it goes to Singleton, because a guy got through the offensive line for Indiana and dove and tried to take Singleton down. But how many times over the years have we seen Penn State try to run some sort of sweep or some sort of wide running play, and someone just gets right into the backfield, and Kayvon Lee or Devin Ford, or no knock on those guys, it's just Nick Singleton has a different level of burst to him. They get met in the backfield and they're taken down for a loss of 4 or 5. And Singleton just has that extra gear where he's able to turn on the jets and no one's even close to him. And I think he's he's a magnificent football player. He and Allen are magnificent football players. We got that glimpse into the best version of Penn State with how the two of them were able to run the football and make things a little bit easier in the passing game. We'll save the big quarterback talk for a little while from now, Craig, but just generally, what were your thoughts on how Sean Clifford played? What were your thoughts on Drew Allard played? The two of them combined 24 for 35, 304 yards, 8.7 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, and an interception.
There's a couple of things I wanted to point out. I think it would be remiss if we didn't give credit to some of the catches that were made on both of the quarterbacks' behalf, especially Sean Clifford. I mean, Mitchell Tinsley made an unreal catch on the sideline to extend the touchdown drive. Made an unreal catch on a scramble drill where Cliff rolled out to the right, is getting chased by a defensive lineman, chucks the ball down the field. It looks like total PI, uncalled. Tinsley, has this juggle thing where it lands.
It just kind of lands here
on the DB and he gets it. And then we have this play going in the third quarter in the opposite direction where Sean Clifford basically threw a ball through a defender's back and Brenton Strange somehow caught it, which might be the most ridiculous catch I've seen from this team this year. So I want to call those out first. I think Clifford did a really good job managing the game, as he is apt to do. I think he missed a couple things, which tends to happen, especially the interception. If you were watching the broadcast, Dan Orlovsky pointed out that he basically read the flat defender wrong. If he came down towards Brenton Strange, Theo Johnson was open on a corner route and had beaten his man, and that looked like it should have been the read instead of trying to fire it to Strange. But overall, I didn't have a problem with how I really generally don't have a problem with how Clifford's played, especially his last 3 games. The offense has shown creativity, execution, signs of life. They've generally kept the quarterbacks clean, and if not for a freak day from Ohio State's defensive line, we might be having a different conversation.
Yeah.
And then,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I didn't get to Drew, and he only had 12 attempts, but some of those are the passes where you're like, oh, okay, now everybody, the first one to Youngcliff, over the middle for 17 yards or whatever it was a holy cow type throw. And then his touchdown to Trey Wallace again was a holy cow type throw when he probably could have just run it in himself. But he just put it in a spot where no one else could catch it other than Trey. And those two throws were just, I think, a glimpse of, and again, Orlovsky was really speaking my language during the broadcast, saying, like, I really want to see Aller control the line of scrimmage, get the guys in the position that they're supposed to be in. I'm not so much worried about his ability to make throws, because we know that he can do that, but can he get the offense in the most successful play? And I think it was in general, everyone had a great day. It was fun to watch.
Yeah, real quick. The last two Penn State games that the duo of Dan Orlovsky and Bob Wischusen have done were the Illinois game last year and the Northwestern game this year. So I am mostly happy that the two of them got to watch a good Penn State performance in person, because I'm a big fan of both of those dudes. I would say with Clifford, that was it was a nice Sean Clifford performance. 15 for 23, 229 yards, 10 yards per attempt. No touchdowns. The interception wasn't particularly good.
Should have had a touchdown.
Should have had. Yeah, Theo Johnson. It wasn't even thrown to Theo Johnson. It like gracefully landed in his hands. Like if Aller makes that throw is evidence that Drew Aller should be starting over Sean Clifford.
Absolutely.
Clifford dropped it in the bucket. Listen, Johnson dropped it. That happens. Oh well. But for the most part, he had a couple throws that were just a little bit off. He had that one that Tinsley went to grab that he reeled into, like you mentioned, extend the drive. But otherwise, it was just like, it was a professional performance by Sean Clifford. At this point, he is what he is. There are going to be those moments like that interception where it's just a little bit wrong. And then there are going to be moments where you look and it's like, oh, he still completed 65.2% of his passes. He was averaging 10 yards per attempt. He kept getting Penn State's offense down the field. I think that after he got that, it's weird to put it this way, but get that interception out of him, came on the field right after the interception, 11-yard completion to Mitchell Tinsley, 6-yard completion to Mitchell Tinsley, 5-yard completion to Parker Washington. He runs for a first down, 14-yard completion to Parker Washington. So right after, and there was a third down conversion with that throw to Washington. So right after that interception, they came out, and that drive ends up with him throwing a couple of incompletions, but he came out and he started to look like he was finding a bit of a rhythm, figuring something out against this Indiana defense that, again, isn't particularly good. But they had that confidence in him. He had that confidence in himself, came out, and from there, just looked solid. There was a 3-and-out after that drive. Touchdown drive starts with Sean Clifford throwing to 27 yards for Katron Allen, and then Allen running it in. That next drive, completion to Theo Johnson, incomplete to Johnson, but there's a personal foul on there. They then decide to start running the ball. I think Clifford had a very nice, very solid, pretty good game. Ultimately, one of those games where Penn State's running backs and offensive line did more than enough. And then Aller, the only complaint I have about Aller is that, like, he throws it too hard, man. Once he figures out, it's like, I think Byron Leftwich was the guy who used to do this, but once he figures out how to take like 10% off of his throws, so they're not just like, they're a little easier to catch, because there's going to be one that just hits someone in the hands and they're going to drop it at one of these points. But otherwise, like, you can just see it. It looks different when he throws the football. It looks easier when he throws the football. And once he gets that stuff in between the ears, like, this is his job. This is going to be his job for the next however many years. And you can even tell with Dan Orlovsky while he was calling the game, You mentioned everything that he said about, I want to see this, this, this. At the same time, you could tell that he's excited about Drew Hour and the promise that he has and the stuff that he is, how he's just able to do stuff. But we'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about a sponsor of this lovely podcast, Craig. And that sponsor is named Home Field Apparel. You heard of these Home Field Apparel people? These Home Field Apparel jokers?
There's some nice stuff.
Yeah. I have my Take Me to Happy Valley on shirt right now. This is a little something for the fine folks on YouTube who are watching this podcast. But yes, Home Field Apparel, as you've known all year, they are our podcast sponsor. If you are a college sports fan on the internet, you've seen them, you're aware of them. They are a premium collegiate apparel brand based out of Indianapolis. They are Hoosiers. They are an Indiana company. So the fact that they still sponsor us, I'm pretty surprised by it. Their shirts are comfortable. They're unique. The designs that they have make you feel a little bit closer to your school. They truly are fantastic, especially the stuff in their Penn State collection. There are 15 pieces of apparel in all in their Penn State collection. And if you are a new customer, you can use the promo code Roar Lions Roar, one word, all uppercase, to get 15% off of your first order. Again, Roar Lions Roar, one word, all uppercase, for 15% off of your first order. Thank you again to Home Field Apparel for sponsoring this podcast. And Craig, let's get to talking about Penn State's defense and what went right for them. This might be the shortest segment that we've ever had in the history of the pod, because I think we could just say everything and then we'd be safe to move on.
Okay, so the only thing that I would even say was not great, injuries, which you never want to see, obviously, in a game where it's especially a blowout. Curtis Jacobs gets hurt, does not return. What does that mean for Penn State's already thin linebacker core? Remains to be seen. Tyler Elsdon got hurt, came back in, got hurt again. Kobe King ends up the leading tackler on the game, which probably no one expected. On the other side, you have his brother Kalen King getting his first interception as a Nittany Lion, which was nice to see considering how many passes this team has broken up. Generally, they don't get me wrong, they played awesome. Once Tuttle was out of the game, I mean, they only had to do what they had. There was almost no threat from Indiana's offense. Now that said, they still made all the plays, to bring it home. So just very impressive. I thought Carter played a great game. I thought that the secondary was, again, ridiculous, as usual. I did want to see. Let's check this real quick. Indiana had 131 passing yards through 3 interceptions. Yep. 16 of 29, and just total domination. I mean,
yeah, 4.5 yards per attempt for their quarterbacks. The one thing I will say about this, because again, this is just it's just Penn State was dominant. Indiana fired their offensive line coach a little bit earlier this year, and this game was a really good example as to why. They had nothing at the point of the attack against Penn State's secondary. Their one drive that worked well, and Jacob Rude told us about this on our preview podcast, was they can script things and they will have 1 or 2 drives where things go well for them. And they're good at scripting things, and then they have 1 or 2 drives. So their first drive ends in a 3-and-out. Their very next drive goes 8 plays, 75 yards for a touchdown. And it seemed to me like the speed that they played at in getting plays off, which just comes after you like that, mixed with the fact that Penn State's kind of got lost in the sauce with how quick things were happening, and Jack Tuttle was able to make some stuff happen with his legs as a result. I think that gave Penn State some trouble. But once they figured that out, once they got a chance to see that as a coaching staff, as a group of players, whatever, they just had no trouble with it. Everything started up front. Again, this is not a good Indiana offense. Jack Tuttle, Dexter Williams, Brendan Sorsby is not the fact that you even had to play 3 quarterbacks in the first place to get to 14 points is pretty indicative of that. But they couldn't do anything throwing the ball. They couldn't do anything running the ball. And a portion of that is because of their struggles. But at the same time, like you mentioned, Craig, a guy like Kobe King steps in and just goes right after. Like their linebacker core just attacked. Penn State's defensive line just kept attacking. You look at how deep Penn State got into its snap counts. We haven't seen the numbers yet, but like Sebastian Costantini had a tackle in this, or had a pass breakup in this game. Like Penn State was getting deep into its list of guys, and I think that's I think that's indicative of how one-sided this game was. Like Indiana's scoring drives were its second drive and its last drive. And I actually think, and I'm interested just hear what you think about this. I think the speed that they played at, it hurt Penn State on the first drive and it hurt Indiana on every other drive after that. Because they didn't have any time to compose themselves.
Correct. When you have, you're constantly behind the chains, and then you're running a play okay, that didn't work, but let's get to the line and snap it again. Okay, that didn't work. Let's get to the line and snap it again. Now you've given your defense, 90 seconds to recover and you're punting the ball again. Again, I don't know if them being more methodical would have been helpful for anyone on that team. But it was a little odd to see how, and maybe that's just their MO. They go that fast all the time.
They do.
But like you said, in the scripted drive, so they have a completion of 14 yards on a big 3rd and 10. This is the touchdown drive, right? Then he hits the pass to Kobe for 35 yards. And then the touchdown was 11. Okay. So there you have 60 of the 131 yards passing on one drive. And then the rest of the game, they had 71 yards passing.
Jesus Christ. But yeah, I'm actually going to now go through and read the amount of time every drive took for Indiana. 1:58 on their first drive, 2:41 on their second. 2:53, 57 seconds, 38 seconds, 1:44, 1:48, 50 seconds, and that was when they kneeled out to end the half. 1:08 seconds, 28 seconds, 52 seconds, 2 minutes and 7 seconds, 14 seconds, and then by that point it's 45 to 7. There were 1, 2, 3, won't count the kneel down, 4, 5 drives by this offense that took less than a minute. And obviously a big portion of that is on Indiana and just how recklessly they play. And this is because I have a lot of Indiana fans and I talk to a lot of Indiana fans, a lot of Indiana friends talk to Indiana fans, reckless to the point of hurting your team. But at the same time, Penn State did a really good job just throwing their offensive line around, getting back to their quarterbacks. And even when it looked like something good could potentially happen, saying, no, that's not going to happen. And I think that's just about all you can ask for out of a defense. Any other final things you want to say about the defense before we get into, dive a little bit deeper into the quarterback stuff?
No, just good to see again the depth. Abdul Carter's development has been awesome. The secondary is super deep, and it's good to see that as well. The defensive line played again super deep because of the score and the situation and the speed at which Indiana played. I mean, and I guess they're doing this to try to avoid allowing the defense to substitute, but I mean,
every player on the defense is better than every player on your offense. Who cares?
Exactly.
If they're substituting, they're putting a worse player in. That helps you. Whatever. Anyway, speaking of substitutes, Penn State's quarterback situation, Craig, coming into this week, it seemed like James Franklin was leaving the door a little bit open for Drew Aller to get in early. Maybe, we haven't figured it out yet. Who knows what this is going to be? Blah, blah, blah. We're talking conversations private, blah, blah, blah. Sean Clifford came out, played the entire first half, played the first 2 drives of the second half. It's 31-7 with 8:21 left to go in the third quarter, and Drew Aller came into the game from that point on. I had a hunch this was what was going to happen. Again, I said on the Hardcore Penn State Football podcast that I just think I think James Franklin gets bored and needs ways to keep himself occupied. And this is a surefire way to keep himself occupied. But at the same time, he made it clear after the game. He didn't just speak. It wasn't just a James Franklin decision. He talked to a bunch of different people within the program to figure out how to play this out. Part of me wonders if he did that because he wanted to make clear this was not a James Franklin and James Franklin only decision. But regardless, that's what we got out of Penn State's quarterbacks. What did you think of how James Franklin, Mike Yurcich, whomever handled Penn State's quarterback situation in this game? Because there were a whole heck of a lot of people who said, maybe we can see Drew Aller for one of these first half possessions. Maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
I mean, obviously, you go back and think about the game, but I probably would have been fine with Aller coming in as soon as Tuttle went down, because you watched what your defense did to this true freshman Indiana quarterback, and it wasn't pretty, and they weren't moving the ball. And I had no problem with how it played out. It was great. He got a ton of time. So he got a full quarter plus almost 9 minutes, which you don't expect for them to necessarily be able to achieve in a Big Ten road game. But as soon as Tuttle was hurt, I was kind of like, oh, maybe now's the time for Drew to come in and get a series. Here's the thing. I'm not a huge fan of there's two items. I want Aller to get time with the ones, because I think that is presents the most challenge to him facing the opposing defense, but also gives him the best chance to succeed because he has the best players that Penn State has on their team around him, right? But I'm also not a huge fan of, like, give Clifford 2 series, then we're going to give Aller a series, and then we're going to give Clifford a series, and then we're going to give Aller a series, or whatever the mix may be. I'm not a huge fan of going back and forth because I think it just screws everything up. And now maybe Clifford is, he's been here forever. That's not the type of thing that would bother him. But I don't know. It's not really my thing. I think once you put the kid in, it's his show for the rest of the game, regardless of when during the game that is.
Yeah, and I want to give a quick hat tip to Audrey Snyder of The Athletic, who put this in the piece she wrote today. Clifford played 55 snaps. Aller got 30 snaps on the day. And I agree with you completely. I wanted, whenever Drew Aller came in, and, I think that Sean Clifford has played enough football that if you put Aller in for a drive and you decide, okay, that's it for your one first half drive, we're going back to Sean, like, it's not going to be a big issue for Sean. But I wanted, whenever Drew Aller was going to step into that game, for Drew to be able to focus and know that this is my show. This is Penn State's offense as run by Drew Aller, not Penn State's offense as run by Sean Clifford that I am interrupting for the next 3 to 10 plays or whatever. And what I will say is, I think that Aller looked really loose, really calm, really composed, and really confident. And of course, Indiana's defense by that time, it looked, if they hadn't given up, they did a really bad job of making it look like they weren't giving up. But by the time that he came into that football game, things were pretty done and dusted. And he got to go into that game with the full understanding that basically nothing that he could do was going to lead to him getting the hook, Sean Clifford coming back in, Clifford having to save the day for a drive or two, and then Drew going back in because it's safe. And I just, I hate having to handle your quarterback situation that way. And the example that I am going to point to for this, of what happens when this sort of situation can go wrong in a good way, a bad way, whatever, was this weekend, a couple 100 miles west of me in South Bend, Indiana. DJ Uiagalelei played quarterback, and he was not having a particularly good day. And, DJ Uiagalelei is similar to Sean Clifford. He's a veteran guy, played a lot of football, not always great, flashes, whatever, this sort of thing. They decide that for no rhyme or reason, just because this was the time to do it, with Notre Dame up 14-0 in the third quarter, this was going to be the time to get Cade Klubnik in and see what Cade can do in this kind of a situation. And because it was a high leverage, one of those high leverage situations, the kid wasn't totally focused and settled and able to go into something a little comfortable. Klubnik's first pass was intercepted. And then he went back into the bench, and DJ Uiagalelei came right back in after Notre Dame scored immediately off of that play. Now, I think these situations are very different. Notre Dame is a much better football team than Indiana, Craig. But the big thing is, I think if you are trying to put Drew Allar in positions to succeed so he is able to build on his performances, you want to put him into a situation where he can have tunnel vision on how things are going to go. And to that end, while I understand the frustration of not seeing him sooner, I think James Franklin, Mike Yurcich, whomever else played this about as well as they could have.
Yeah, I agree. And to my point specifically, if you do this trading possessions or whatever, it has to be extremely clear that it's 2 Clifford series, 1 Allar series, 2 Clifford series, 1 Allar series, regardless of outcome. You cannot be reactive in this situation because you're just going to torpedo someone's confidence, probably end up losing a game that you should win. And then it's just a bad situation all around. Then you have 2 quarterbacks that don't like the head coach, maybe don't have the confidence to make the throws that they should make. And so far, we haven't seen that from either Penn State quarterback.
Yeah. And if I may, you mentioned something really important there. Sean Clifford looked like he was having the goddamn time of his life watching Drew Allar play quarterback in that game.
He's pointing first downs. He's like,
right,
is he going to make it? Like, oh, don't get tackled. And then he runs for a first. Yeah, fully. If you didn't know better, you would have thought that was the guy on the offense that was Sean Clifford's younger brother. He was probably jealous that Allar completed a pass to Liam. He's only got one of those, and now I think Allar's hit him 3 times this season. Yeah, they're building up a bit of a connection. You got to think that there is some conspiring between Drew Allar and Liam Clifford to get Liam's older brother out of the paint. But yeah, Clifford looked like he was having a blast, and he was really proud and really happy with the performance Allar was putting on out there. Allar looked like he was having a blast playing. And then what was happening? He was coming to the sideline. He was sitting right down on the bench, and Sean Clifford is right there talking to him, praising him, coaching him through things, whatever. I don't know. The only way you could say that this was not handled well, the quarterback situation, this game was not handled well, is if coming into this game, the only way it could have been handled well was for Drew Allar to start. Right. And if you're there, it's basically not a worthwhile conversation, in my opinion, because regardless of arm talent and everything else that goes into it, clearly the preparation aspect, the mental aspect, the understanding of coverages and defenses and everything that goes into being a Division I quarterback takes a lot longer to learn than perhaps telling Abdul Carter, rush the quarterback, or telling Drew Shelton, block the man in front of you. And I'm not saying that offensive line or linebacker are easy positions by any means, but you have to have so much more than just a physical game to be able to play quarterback well in the Big Ten. So, I think that's all completely fair. And now Sean Clifford is 16 yards away from passing Trace McSorley for the most passing yards in Penn State history. So that's happening this week against Maryland at some point, barring something, completely unforeseen. It's going to be a really cool moment for Clifford to do that. And I will bet money that if not the first, one of the first people over to him to give him a hug, to dap him up, to praise him after that happened is going to be Drew Allar. Because it seems like they have a really special relationship between the two of them. I agree.
Let's move on to handing out some game balls. Craig, you hand out game balls on the offensive side of the football and the defensive side of the football. Let's go with offense first. Who's getting your game balls?
I'm going to go Brenton Strange. To me, played a whale of a game that didn't necessarily show up with scoring, like no touchdowns, right? But only 2 catches for 29 yards. The catches
one of which was a really good catch.
Insane. I think that crazy little T formation that they run, or the wishbone, or whatever you want to call it, when both tight ends are in the backfield, or Strange lines up as the center back with a running back on either side of him. These are he's just provided another level of security and consistency in blocking that has allowed these 2 freshman running backs to flourish. And again, that catch is like, holy cow. And it extended a drive. There was that weird substitution, non-penalty right before that, where Penn State thought they had a first down on penalty, but then it ended up being 3rd and 5 anyway. And Clifford rolls out and throws this ball, like I said, basically went through the defender and keeps the drive going. So everyone else that we've talked about, he'll get my first one. I thought he played a very solid all-around game.
Yeah. Obvious tip of the hat to Katron Allen, but for me, it's going to Drew Shelton and JB Nelson. I mean,
big time.
The fact I started laughing to myself earlier today over just the thought of what would happen. I'm not going to name any specific names or anything like that, but if I told you in 2015, in 2021, whatever, that Penn State's starting left tackle was out, and the guy that they would put at left tackle has to play right tackle because the right tackle is out. So a true freshman has to play there. And Penn State's starting left guard is out, and then its backup left guard gets hurt on the first play, and they got to put a junior college guy in there. You would expect they're running for 1.2 yards per carry, even against the worst of defenses that they would go up against. You would assume that the quarterbacks would be running for their lives. And the way that Nelson and Shelton held up on Clifford's blind side, that's really impressive to me, man. That's something that Penn State just hasn't had in years past. And I think they need to get a lot of credit. Like, I don't recall Allen's third touchdown off the top of my head, but Singleton touchdown, they ran over to that left side. Allen's first touchdown.
They were all to the left.
They were all to the left. Yeah. So all 4 touchdowns were behind the side of the offensive line with those guys in there. And, that's, again, testament to Phil Troutline, testament to these guys. That it's just really impressive to me. It's not something that I expect out of Penn State's offense. Defensive side of the football. Who's getting your game ball for this one, Craig?
Man, that's a really good question. You know what? What the heck? I'll just say something that you didn't expect to see, a backup playing a huge role, leading the team in tackles. I'll go with Kobe King because, again, I don't think anybody saw that performance coming. When even that unit has, let's be very frank, that unit has struggled mightily and been exposed in the passing game and the run game by some superior opponents who we don't need to rehash that right now. But what a confidence boost for that kid to come in and have a game like that. Again, we know Indiana's not great, but still, hat tip to him.
Yeah, there are just a million different guys on Penn State's defense who would deserve this. So I'm just going to take a cop out, and I'm going to say Kalen King because that interception that he had was quite good. Went up, played the ball. I mean, Joey Porter Jr. is the guy on Penn State's defense, and he is, we have 3, maybe 4 more games with him before he goes and makes a whole hell of a lot of money in the NFL. Teams know not to throw at him. that interception was proof that throwing at Kalen King, further proof that throwing at Kalen King is not a particularly great idea either.
Agreed.
So I'll give him his flowers, but if you want to give it to Kobe King, Jalen Reed, Jair Brown, Adisa Isaac, Chop Robinson, like whatever, give it to them. Like, I'm not going to count up the number of guys on Penn State's defense who recorded a tackle. It was a lot. So I think that's it for Indiana chat. We'll take a minute or two here at the end of the podcast to look ahead to what Penn State has up on the horizon, which is this Saturday. They play host to the Maryland Terrapins, 3:30 p.m. kick on Fox. Penn State and Maryland. Things get a little bit testy when they take the field together. Last year, the Nittany Lions won 31-14 in a game that probably wasn't as close as that score might indicate. And then the year before, Maryland came to Happy Valley, won 35-19, just threw the ball over Penn State. Nittany Lions entering this game with a 78% chance of winning per FPI, 12-point favorites. Maryland, the number 35 team in the nation in SP plus 30th offensively, 49th defensively. And Craig, the thing that I will say about Maryland is that they're a team where their lows are very, very low. When things don't go well for this team, last week was a really good example. They played against Wisconsin in Camp Randall. They lost 23-10, had 189 yards of total offense, only one interception, but it just was not looking good. On the other side of it, when this offense is cooking, when Taulia Tagovailoa is hitting his very talented group of pass catchers, when Roman Hembry and Antoine Littleton are able to get a bit of a head of steam in the run game, when their defensive players are able to create some havoc plays, they could be a team that is a little bit dangerous. They gave Michigan their run for their money in Ann Arbor a little bit earlier this season. So just what are your general thoughts as we head into this next game week against a team that, even on their down years, they come into Happy Valley with that little something extra prepared for the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, they definitely bring the smoke against Penn State generally. I mean, now you go back 3 years ago, it was the KJ Hamler show in College Park.
Were you at that game?
I was not. I have like 13 kids. I don't go to games anymore. Even though I am literally probably 20 minutes from the stadium. And Sean Clifford, great game, 56 zip, whatever the score was, just absolute beatdown. And then they totally stomped Raheem Jarrett, totally exposed Lamont Wade over and over and over again in Happy Valley in the COVID year. And then last year was the DeHaan Johnson show. Probably could have had like 4 touchdowns, and Jair Brown sealed it. And again, like you said, it's feast or famine for them. If Tualia is hitting, and that's always been his bugaboo. If he's on, they can play with anybody in the country.
Yeah.
But have the times that he's been on been equal to the times that he's been off? And they had a bye week, and then he missed a game. They had a bye week, and he came back for Wisconsin. How healthy is he? Nobody really knows. Deplorable game in Wisconsin. To be fair, it was played in a monsoon. Graham Mertz was no better, but Graham Mertz is terrible. No one looks at him and says, this is a top quarterback in the conference.
You have some respect for Graham Mertz, my man. He's done a better job ever since Jim Leonard has taken over. I'm not going to sit here and say he's been great, but he's been better.
It's only going up. Only way to go is up.
That's right. That's right.
But again, like you mentioned, they have elite skill on the outside. They have some nice running backs. They have a much better offensive line than Indiana. They have a much better defensive line than Indiana. The back seven, who knows? Their special teams game, wild card. So we'll see. I don't think Penn State's going to have any issue bringing their juice to this game. 3:30 kick, Happy Valley, and there are so many guys from Maryland on the squad. It's kind of like the Rutgers thing, where we said like we got the big banner that says all these guys. Rutgers calls the New Jersey Traders. Well, there's as many kids from Maryland that are on Penn State's team. So I think they're not going to have any problem bringing the excitement and playing a great game. And to be honest, the offense has played about as well as I could have expected the last 3 games, outside of obviously turnovers. But I think I have a feeling it's going to be a very entertaining game.
Yeah, I mean, I think Penn State's a clearly better football team than Maryland. But like you mentioned, when Maryland is cooking and things are going well for them, they can be a really dangerous football team. But fortunately, I think that Penn State has started to figure some stuff, not even figure some stuff out. Their big issue over the last couple of years is they lose a game and then they lose the game after it. Minnesota, they came out after losing to Michigan and kicked the hell out of Minnesota. Indiana, they came out after losing to Ohio State and kicked the hell out of Indiana. So this is a team that Penn State is better than, and Penn State, I don't think, is running the risk of finding itself in a position where, we just don't have that little extra something this week. We're just not our day, whatever. No, this is a Penn State team that they were 15 in the college football playoff rankings last week. Obviously, it's different for the AP, but the AP, they are 14th in the country. This is a Penn State team that stuff is going to happen ahead of them, and that stuff could lead to Penn State being in a very cozy spot for a New Year's Six Bowl, depending on how things work out for them. And I think that Penn State's going to bring that little extra something. I think that going up against this Maryland passing attack is going to be tricky, but I think getting a sense of, while Indiana's nowhere near as good, going up against a team that's going to want to play fast and attack, even if they suck at it, is getting a glimpse of that's going to be something that's really helpful for Penn State. So I think it's going to be a good week for Penn State. And if Penn State wins this game, they should win out. Like, they should be able to win out very easily. I think they're much, much better than Rutgers, and I think they're much, much better than Michigan State.
Yeah, they should win out.
They should. Absolutely. They should. But I would say this is the game on the schedule where if they're going to lose, I would be primed to think they're going to lose.
Yeah. I would be extremely surprised to see a loss. I think it could be more competitive than would make some people comfortable. It's a big spread, but we'll see.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, Craig, before I wrap this pod up?
No, I'm just, like I said, just seeing the young guys continue. Like, we're just seeing how much James Franklin is getting out of this recruiting class last year with the amount of true freshmen that have played.
Yeah.
And it is an unbelievable number. It's really cool to watch because you're seeing the groundwork laid for the next 2 seasons. And they're, like you said, they're in a position to be in a New Year's Six Bowl and have this unbelievable amount of talent in the underclasses that can really hope to string some nice seasons together. So,
agreed. And only thing I want to say is shout out to Penn State women's soccer. I am, as a lot of you know, I live in Columbus, Ohio. Earlier today in Columbus, Ohio, the Penn State women's soccer team took on the Michigan State Spartans at lower.com field, home of the Columbus Crew, with the Big Ten championship on the line. And the Nittany Lions, it was a little bit tricky. Certainly was not fun, was not easy, but they were able to pick up a 3-2 win. Penn State was up 2-1. Michigan State scores just a banger in the 75th minute, and then at the 82nd minute, ball gets played into the box. Ali Schlegel just decides she's going to be the one who gets to it in the ensuing chaos. Nittany Lions win 3-2. They're Big Ten champions. They're heading to the NCAA tournament. Erica Dombach, next coach of the United States Women's National Team. When that happens, I'm very excited for that. Even though I will not be excited to see Erica leave Happy Valley. Actually, let's not have Erica be the next coach of the United States Women's National Team. I'd like to keep her at Happy Valley. But yes, thank you everyone for listening to this edition of Roar Lions Roars. Always make sure you're subscribing to us wherever you go and get your podcast. Head to the Linktree link in our Twitter bio for where that could be. If it's somewhere where you can leave a review, leave us a 5-star review. If you can't leave us a review and you can just rate us, give us 5 stars. We'd appreciate that. If you're over on YouTube, head into the comments section, talk about Penn State with one another, and have a good time doing that. Make sure you're following us on our Twitter account at RLR Blog. And again, thank you very much to Home Field Apparel for sponsoring this podcast. Again, For first-time orders, use the promo code ROARLIONSROAR, one word, all uppercase, for 15% off of your first order. One last time, thank you very much for listening to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. For my co-host Craig Fritz, I'm Bill DeFilippo. Take care, everyone.